Welcome back to the Attack Flow online training. This is section 4, visualization. The first 3 sections really looked at attack flow and how you build flows. But in this section, we're going to turn our attention to some of the things that you can do with the flows that you've built, and in particular, how to visualize them in new ways to automate tedious tasks and generate insights. Let's start by talking about what the term flow visualization means. Attack flow is already a visual medium, but it is a single type of visualization, a flow diagram, that may be limiting for certain audiences or purposes. For example, the incident response team wants to zero in on the lateral movement and persistence techniques, and that's not easy to spot in the flow diagram. Or your CTI team is preparing a report and they want to add an appendix of all the observed TTPs, which is tedious work copying and pasting data from one format into another. Flow visualization is a set of tools that processes the machine-readable format of attack flow and depicts that data in new ways. We have 2 motivations behind flow visualization. The first is to save time through automation. For example, building a TTP table for an intelligence briefing is simple but tedious work, while flow visualization automates that for you. The second motivation is to look at the data in new ways, to look for patterns and generate insights, or in some cases you may want to merge the flow data with another data source. Our visualization tools are hosted on a platform called Observable, and it is separate from Attack Flow Builder. Separating it out allows us to try some new things and take some small risks without reducing the quality or usefulness of Attack Flow Builder. You can find a list of all the visualizations discussed here on our project website by going to ctid.io/flow and then clicking on visualization. As with Attack Flow Builder, all the data you supply stays in the browser. We do not collect or share your data. You also don't need an account on the Observable platform. It is free to use without any registration. Okay, now let's take a look at each of the visualizations in the Attack Flow 3 release, starting with the TTP table. The TTP table visualization is inspired by the appendices that CISA often puts into their advisories. This appendix contains tables of TTPs grouped by tactic and links to the MITRE ATT&CK website so that readers can learn more about them. To use this visualization, you'll go to the Observable page. By the way, the Observable platform calls these pages notebooks, so I'm going to use that term throughout the rest of this training. Each visualization notebook has some instructions at the top, and then it has an area for you to upload your flow. After you upload, the notebook will display the TTP table, and there's a button to click to copy the table in HTML format, which you can then paste into Microsoft Word or a web page. Each visualization has some configuration options as well. For example, with this TTP visualization, you can customize the color scheme. You might want to match it to your branding, for example, so that you can include it in a professional report. As a side note, the Observable platform is made for sharing and remixing content. So for those software engineers in the audience, you can fork a notebook and enhance or customize it with your own code. This is a close-up of what the TTP table looks like. It goes through your flow and pulls out all of the actions that have TTPs mapped to them, creates a table for each tactic, and then a row for each technique. Like the CISA reports that we drew inspiration from, each technique links to the MITRE ATT&CK website so you can learn more. And then under the use column, that's not just the MITRE ATT&CK text, it's actually pulling the description text from your flow. So this is a very useful artifact that you can create in less than a minute using flow visualization. On this slide, we see how easy it is to paste the TTP table into another application like Microsoft Word. The pasted copy retains the color scheme you choose. So for example, I've chosen MITRE colors, which is going to look nice when I include it in my MITRE formatted report template. The next visualization is a timeline view. This is inspired by a number of CTI reports we have seen in the wild that include a timeline of an incident. As you can imagine from this example, this can be fairly tedious to build because you have to carefully plan out the scale of the horizontal axis and then precisely position the events on that axis. This is what the timeline view looks like in flow visualization. For this visualization to work, the flow does need to contain execution timestamps, which is something we looked at in sections 2 and 3 as part of the action properties in attack flow. This is a zoomed in version of a timeline. The visualization has a lot of settings to customize the look and feel, and it's really easy to create a high quality graphic in just a few minutes that could otherwise take a few hours. The next visualization is the matrix view. This one is inspired by the MITRE ATT&CK matrix itself, where the tactics are represented as columns and the techniques corresponding to each tactic are displayed as rows in that column. In our visualization, we are only displaying the tactics and techniques that are in your flow, and it includes the description text from each action too. This view is nice because some audiences may be focused on specific tactics. For example, your incident responders might focus on lateral movement and persistence techniques, and this visualization enables that. This is a zoomed in version of the matrix view. All of the visualizations have options to save or copy the image in high quality image formats that you can easily incorporate into reports, presentations, or web pages. Next, we have the Navigator visualization. This view draws the flow on top of an Attack Navigator matrix, which you can create on your own using the Attack Navigator tool. We actually created this visualization way back in Attack Flow 1, but now in Attack Flow 3, we have cleaned it up and moved it onto this new platform, and it's more accessible and customizable now. This is a close-up of the Navigator view. This visualization is an example of merging flow data with other data sources. For example, Attack Navigator lets you add colors or scores to the TTPs in the attack matrix, and you could use these features to represent control coverage or detection coverage or whatever you want. Then when you draw the flow on top, you can step through and see which parts of the attack you should have visibility into and which parts of the attack you do not, which might give you insight into future defensive planning and investment. The last visualization is a tree map. This one is inspired by stock market visualizations that show companies in green or red depending on whether their price is up or down today. The size of each tile is proportional to that company's market cap, which means the visualization also gives us a sense of how the market as a whole is doing. Plus, the companies are grouped by sector, so we can see which sectors are up or down. It's a really rich visualization, and we wanted to bring this idea to the realm of threat-informed defense. This visualization is different from the other ones we've looked at because it aggregates data across multiple flows. In the example here, I've loaded up 12 flows, and the visualization combines them all succinctly. This is a close-up. Each tile corresponds to a technique, and the size of the tile is proportional to its prevalence, that is, the number of times it was observed in the dataset. Techniques are colored and grouped by tactic, which helps us see which tactics are most common in our data as well. To really make this visualization look like the stock market graphic that inspired it, we also offer the option to upload TTP scoring data in Attack Navigator format. The scoring data can be used to represent security control coverage, and when combined with the prevalence data from our attack flows, this can help us locate areas where we are lacking in coverage. Now we've talked about all of these visualizations, let's see them in action with a quick demo. First of all, we need to get to the visualization page. So let's start by going to the Attack Flow website, which is ctid.io/flow. And then in the table of contents on the left side, let's click on Visualization. The visualization page has this gallery at the top showing you which options are available, and you can click through to view more details. And then each one of these has a button that will open it up in a new tab. So we are going to start with the tactic table. When I click this button, it's going to launch the observable platform and open the tactic table notebook. Each of these notebooks has a little bit of an introduction and some explanatory text about how to use it. So this one is pretty simple. We're just going to start by selecting an attack flow. The attack flow does need to be in that sticks bundle format, which ends with the JSON extension. Now, to get a copy of an attack flow in sticks format, there are a few ways you can do this. First of all, let's go back to the attack flow website and go to the example flows page. On here, we have a list of examples. You can find the one that you are interested in. And there are a couple ways to get the sticks version of these flows. So the first way is to click this Open Attack Flow Builder link. This will be useful if you're building your own flows locally. Under the File menu, you can go to Export Sticks File, and this will create a bundle that you can put into your visualization. The other option here, which is just a little bit faster, is just to come and click the Download Sticks link that is underneath each of these examples. Either way, this will give you a JSON file that is in sticks bundle format, which you can then load up into the visualization. So I'm going to select the Black Bossa ransomware flow. And you can see when I open this, it immediately draws this TTP table down here. Now the way this works is this goes through your flow and it finds every action that is mapped to a TTP. It creates a table for each tactic and then a row under that table for each technique within that tactic. It links to MITRE ATT&CK so that your readers can quickly go and learn more about that TTP. And then in the use column, it copies and pastes the description field from your action. Now each of these visualizations has the option to customize it. This one lets you customize the colors. So for example, your branding may look more like red and black. And so that's really easy to customize here like this. And then when you're done, you can copy this and immediately drop it into Microsoft Word or any other application that can handle HTML. And you can see that it retains that color scheme that you've chosen. And so now you've just quickly built this easy TTP appendix for your report. Next, we'll look at the matrix view. Once again, we'll come back to the Attack Flow website and we'll click this button to launch the observable platform. The first thing I need to do is select my sticks bundle. And once again, I'm going to choose the Blockbuster ransomware. And you can see that it draws the matrix view down below. So this view is similar to the previous one in that it is going through your flow and taking all the actions that are mapped to TTPs. It is grouping them by tactics, which are now represented by the columns, and then the rows within each column represent the techniques. This visualization has options to customize whether tactic IDs are displayed, as well as whether technique IDs are displayed. If you find that it is difficult to view this visualization within the content column of this website, you can also use this full screen button, which will make it easy to see everything at once. And then when you're ready to export your graphic, you can click download as SVG. And then it's very easy to just drag and drop this into a PowerPoint presentation like this. The next visualization is the Attack Navigator. Once again, I'm going to click here and open this up in Observable and select a flow. In this case, I'm using the Tesla Kubernetes flow just because it's a smaller and simpler flow. This visualization kind of gets overwhelmed if you pick a really big flow like Blockbuster. This visualization is also unique because this combines your attack flow data with another data source, in this case with an Attack Navigator layer. So there are a few Attack Navigator layers built in that you can select here. The first one is just a blank enterprise matrix. There are also a couple layers that are borrowed from our mappings projects. For example, this one is showing the heat map of NIST 853 mapping coverage onto enterprise attack. Or you can upload your own Navigator file if you have one that contains, for example, detection coverage or security control coverage. And then when we scroll down here, what we can see is that this has taken that heat map as seen in Attack Navigator, and it's drawn the nodes and edges of the attack flow on top of that diagram. And so you can sort of step through the attack here and see where you have coverage and where you do not. Once again, this visualization does tend to exceed the column width of the notebook, and so there is a full screen button here to make it easier to see the whole thing at once. And then when you're ready to use this in a presentation, you can click Download SVG and then easily drag this into your PowerPoint presentation like this. The next visualization is the timeline view. So once again, I'm going to click here to launch the observable platform. And I'm going to start off by opening an attack flow. Now this particular attack flow is actually just a hypothetical flow I made up because most of the flows in our example library don't actually have execution timestamps. And you do need to have execution timestamps in order to generate a timeline view for obvious reasons. And you can see here, once I open this up, it has gone ahead and constructed this timeline view for me, and it has placed all the actions on this timeline view according to when they occurred. There are a lot of customization options for this one. For example, the line thickness or the box thickness. You can change the colors here like this. More importantly, you can also decide if you want to show the entire date and time or just a portion of it. So if you look at this incident here, this is actually all happening on February 1st. So it might be useful just to show the time. That way you're not showing the same date over and over. And then vice versa, if you had an incident that was spread out over many months, you might just want to show the date because the time wouldn't be that helpful. And then if you find that the timeline view is scrolling off the page, as with the other visualizations, you can go full screen. This one also has the option to turn this into a vertical view like this, which can sometimes make more space, especially if you want to display this in a document, in a page layout, or a web page, or what have you. I'm going to go back to horizontal because I want to put this into a PowerPoint documentation. So I'm going to just click Download SVG like this. And now I can drag that into my PowerPoint over here. And now I've got this really nice timeline view. This one is a huge time saver. These are very tedious to build by hand, just to get all the spacing right, to get the units on that time axis figured out. So the final visualization is the tree map view, which, as you'll recall, was inspired by that stock market graphic. So let's take a look at how this one works. Now, you'll recall that this visualization is a little bit different because instead of rendering a single flow, this actually renders a group of flows together. So here I've got some flows that I selected ahead of time, and I'm going to open these up. And you can see when I load this up that it creates this tree map view for me. And so each of these tiles here is one of the TTPs, and the size of the tile is proportional to its prevalence, which is how many times that this TTP was seen in the group of flows that I loaded. So for example, deobfuscate, decode files was seen 8 times in this group of flows. And then when we take a look at this tactic as a whole, defense evasion, we can see that this tactic was actually observed a lot in this group of flows that we loaded up. Whereas if we scroll down to the corner over here, we can see, for example, exfiltration and credential access were seen a lot less often. This flow also lets you mash up with other data. So if you have an attack navigator layer, you can use that to provide defensive scoring information. And let me show you what that means. So over here, I have an attack navigator layer that I made based on the enterprise matrix, and I assigned a defensive score to each of these techniques. Now, these are all random scores that I made for the purpose of demonstration, but you can imagine using this to assign detection coverage or control coverage within your organization. So for example, these green ones, these are high scores, like this exploit public facing application. I've got a 95 defense score on this. The ones that are red have lower scores. So for example, this inter-process communication technique, I only have a score of 6. So once you've built this layer like this, you can come to layer controls and you can export it right here as JSON. And then over here, you can load it up into your visualization. So I've prepared a layer like this ahead of time. And now what it's doing is it's changing the coloring of my graphic. So the green is showing me where I have TTPs where I've got good control coverage, and red is showing me where I've got TTPs with bad control coverage. And so this view really lets me get a high level picture of where are we strong, where are we weak. For example, I think on defense evasion, I've got maybe kind of a 50-50 coverage here, especially when we're waiting for which techniques are more prevalent. Whereas if I look over here at command and control, this is a very prevalent tactic, but we have almost no coverage of it. So this is a really rich visualization. It really rewards collecting a lot of data and carefully studying the visualization that results. This one has a lot of options to customize, for example, showing the technique IDs or tactic IDs if your audience knows MITRE ATT&CK. There's also a few different options for how you want to lay out the tiles on the graph. These just give you different kind of aesthetics, but doesn't actually change the underlying data. And then once you're done, as with all of these, you can download this graphic, load it up into your presentation. And now you've got a really nice graphic that you can include when you're briefing your coworkers and your leadership. This brings us to the end of section 4, where we learned all about flow visualization. In section 5, we will talk about what's new in Attack Flow 3, which you may find interesting if you have used Attack Flow 2 extensively. But for newcomers, I encourage you to skip section 5 and just start diving in and using Attack Flow now. Visit our Get Involved page to learn how organizations and individuals alike can work together to advance our common goal of expanding threat-informed defense. And follow us on LinkedIn for future updates on Attack Flow and other major projects such as Mapping Explorer and Summiting the Pyramid.